Greetings and welcome to the BlastCast. I am Jarvis, and with me as always is a man who loves double takes, Lightning Dragon.
Yeah, fun times.
Yeah, just as a quick side note here, this is going to be a long one. To give you an idea how long, we recorded the whole show, and my recording footage decided to cut the first 20 minutes, which we're re-recording right now, because it was so long that it started overwriting, deleting the original 20 minutes. So the first part of this is a redo, and then I'll be attaching it to the back end of it where we start talking about the EMP stuff. So here we go.
Round 2, Electric Boogaloo.
All right, and around the verse this week, they did talk about the caves. I love these caves. They look great. They're coming along. They added some artificial lighting effects, I guess, to kind of keep things visible. But the flashlights are causing a real problem. They kind of wash out all the effects, the bump mapping, everything, and they're looking into redoing those. And I haven't been a big fan of the flashlight effects, particularly when you accidentally forget to turn them off in your ships, because, well,
you can't turn them off and you're sitting in a seat.
Yeah, and they blind you, so you have the blinding of the planet behind you, and you have the blinding of your flashlight on your screens. It's a real mess, but hopefully this will inspire them to do something that's a little that washes out less of the graphics and looks a little bit more organic.
I'm also not a big fan of them adding artificial lights, but I understand it's a video game. Hopefully they won't have to do this as much if they fix the flashlight thing. Some people were suggesting like flares and stuff, but other people were saying, yeah, but if you add flares, people are going to grief and throw flares all over like a space station or something, and, you know, screw up with people's, you know, graphics cards and stuff. And it's like, yeah, let's just fix the flashlight then.
Yeah, people don't grief online. Doesn't happen.
No, never.
So let's get into Star Citizen Live. This week it was titled All Things Flyable, and this was kind of a big one, so we decided to go ahead and record a apparently overly long section. So let's go back into it again. So the first thing that came up in 1:30 seconds was that the 890 jump currently uses a bit too much fuel, and they stated that is a bug.
Exploration ships, to me, they should have way more range than any other standard ship, either by having larger fuel tanks, more efficient engines. Their thing of saying, oh, it's a large ship and it uses a lot of fuel, but also it's a bug. I don't know if it's just the way they phrased it or not, but hopefully ships that are actually built to explore are going to have significantly more range than ships that are not.
Right, and that's why the large ships have like docking bays, hangars, and things like that. And, you know, right now we have a very limited game as far as what the overall scope is. We're still dealing with one system, and I truly believe that we might see sometime soon as a surprise event, maybe even during CitizenCon, that they pull Levski out since they need to add a new planet in, and Levski's not part of Crusader, that they go ahead and get ready to give us our first jump point and a second system. I think once you start seeing more systems and things come online, and the ability to plot courses that aren't dictated by fixed points, that they'll start revisiting the fuel, because these large ships, some of them like the exploration ships and the capitals, they're supposed to be out there for days and for weeks. They're supposed to be an experience to be out in deep space looking for something. You can't just have a situation where your ship runs out of fuel in an hour and you gotta either go back to a base or call someone out to fix you or refuel you.
Yeah, that's not what the exploration ships are for.
Yeah,
they don't run out of fuel.
And the capitals as well. They're not made just to be done, you know, done in a few minutes. They've got to have the endurance to last. And as I said, a lot of these systems aren't online yet. The scope and scale isn't online yet. You're going to see continual tweaks to these things as time goes by, and it probably won't even resemble anything close to the way it is right now by the time it gets closer to a finished product.
That actually would also go double for carriers, because not only do they have to have their own fuel supply, but they have to refuel the ships that dock in them.
So at 8 minutes in, they got into the hover mode about how it's being replaced with something called Proximity Assist.
And it's a button that you push. Hooray, we have a button. And when you push it, you go into a VTOL mode, or VTOL, V2L, however you want to pronounce it. Control's much nicer, more accurate, keeping you from flying your ship around like you're a hummingbird or something. This is good, probably. We'll have to wait and see. Another good example of this is KSP. In KSP, you have a fine controls mode, which is only for your, strafing, yaw, pitch, roll. Because in KSP, you're using the keyboard for like 90% of your gameplay. So instead of like, you press W or you press S or whatever, and the keyboard just says send the signal. It's 100% or nothing, right? Because it's not a flight device. So with fine control mode, you're getting about half as much response time, or there's a little bit of a ramp up, so you can click and hold it for a little bit longer and not have your ship like flip and explode because of aerodynamic pressures. It's probably good. It'll be nice to see something that's more flighty.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it comes out. And they did add something, we talk about how that you have that precision mode or whatnot that you have in Kerbal. We have a similar thing already where you have the slider that lets you adjust a little bit, and that does need to be worked on a little bit more, but I'm glad that that's in there. But this is why you need to have jerk on rotations and on accelerations, because like when you have people who use digital controls like the keyboard, having 0 to 100 is the only ramp up. When you have digital response on digital commands, it really makes fine movement difficult. And I think a lot of what made hover mode difficult for mouse and keyboard users was that in order to go left and right, you had to roll. You had to roll left and right in order to kind of get that movement. And what is that they had to use the Q and the E on a roll rate that had no ramp up, basically had infinite jerk. So what should have been better, since Chris had talked about before he wants the game to be pitch and roll based, is that the left and right in the mouse, at least in hover mode, at the very least, should have actually rolled the ship, right or left, and that would have given it a lot more control in hover mode. And I feel that that's where a lot of the problems stemmed, besides also the way that the throttle worked when you were in hover mode. Throttle should have been your up and down and things like that, because you're controlling your engine thrust. But
there's a lot of ways.
There's a lot of things that could have been. I part of me is like apprehensive, because it's like I feel that in some regards they threw it out too quickly without addressing some of the major concerns for control. All right, now let's have to see how it handles and go from there. I said I really think that the helicopter quote unquote mode, the one we had right now, it has potential. It just needs a few tweaks. But I guess it's going away.
I'm all for a button, because if you slow down too much, you got stuck. You'd get trapped in your VTOL mode, and you couldn't get out of it unless you did really weird things. Again, it's something that we've said is, just make it a button mode. I mean, I know they were trying to reduce the amount of modes, and to be fair, some of the modes were pretty redundant. So it's fine that some of them are a smooth transition, but VTOL wasn't a smooth transition, so it's fine to have a button.
Yeah, and you can't automate everything. Some things require a human touch. Now, at 10 minutes and 33 seconds in, they did talk a little bit about the thrusters being scaled down in atmosphere.
Me personally, and this is fine. You like modern engines and stuff. They're designed a certain way, so they work better in atmosphere conditions, high atmosphere, or they work better in no atmosphere or very low atmosphere. They are spaceships at the end of the day, right? And there's probably going to be ships that, there are, right? There's going to be ships that don't go in atmosphere. There's kind of two ways you can look at this. And one of them is they're optimized for space flight, but they still work because it's space tech, it's sci-fi. Or you can have it where they are hybrid thrusters, so that, the down thrusters have like two modes. They have like a vacuum mode where they're more efficient or something, and they have a atmospheric mode. So you can have like a two-stage type of lower thruster so that you get more bang for your buck. Either way works. I'm okay if they're just less powerful because it's a spaceship.
Yeah, as long as it's consistent in their lore and everything works the same, I'm not against it either. And you talk about like the retro thrust too. Some ships aren't designed very with any visual retro thrust, and I think they need to handle, like Chris had talked about form meeting function, and we talked about that a lot as well. I think that the ships should definitely have the performance envelopes that kind of can be explained by the way that they look. Like if you have a ship that has powerful retros, but you don't actually see any retros in the ship, that breaks the game a little bit, in my opinion. But also the equipment, as far as thrusters and retros go, is that I feel that one of the things the game is really lacking in to some degree, and you can hear it better actually when you turn it off and turn on the ships now. There's that the engines coming on, engines coming off sound. And that's amazing. That to me, that sounds like something spooling up. The engines are spinning up and whatnot. when you're going to go ahead and stop, you hit the retros, the engines reverse, whatever, the power gets shunted, there needs to be that sense of delay, or that doesn't have to be a huge delay. We're talking about just enough that it doesn't feel like you're on foot in an FPS like Call of Duty. It needs to feel like you're in a vehicle. That it takes a moment for these mechanical devices to swap over. Part of this becomes like, you learn your vehicle, you learn what it can and can't do, you predict, you do what you do ahead of time to get where you need to go. Like when we play DCS, right? An F-14 just doesn't turn on a dime. You have to know what you're trying to do. You have to plan your turn. You have to, when you're coming into land, you just don't come in full speed and then pop the air brakes and then like suddenly just plop right on the runway. You have to come in and you have to.
I mean, you can, but
well, you can.
Crash.
You probably will crash. Yeah, that's true. Or you could try to one wire it. But anyway, so the whole point though is that these devices, these machines need to feel like machines. And it was a few weeks back. It was within the first minute or so of the Around the Verse. It's one where they were talking about the Nautilus, and it may have been a gaffe on his part, but basically, John Crew said this:
for the players that want to involve themselves in combat, but not actually be that sort of either twitch shooter or strategic bomber. They just want to play the longer game, and this is. The Nautilus is the perfect ship for that. Twitch shooter, twitch shooter, twitch shooter, twitch shooter, twitch shooter.
Now, that could have just been a gaffe, but what I've seen in the history of the flight development Star Citizen is this desire to make things faster and faster. I mean, you go back to the original panel they had about the controls and whatnot, where Calix said they wanted all the inputs to feel kind of samey between the first person and the flight, and, well, kind of mission accomplished there to a large degree, but that's one of the large reasons that flight is in such a bad place. Even games like Battlefield and whatnot, once you sit in the cockpit of a helicopter or an airplane, things handle differently. The idea that it may have been a gaffe, or it may have been a Freudian slip, but basically coming out and saying that having twitch shooter, there's nothing in Star Citizen that should be twitch shooter. It doesn't blend with survival mechanics. It's like if you had a chessboard there and one guy was playing with checkers pieces and the other guy was playing with chess pieces. How's that game going to play out? I mean, either you make everything work with the whole, or you have a mess and no one knows what the rules are and no one knows how to win or how to lose. Knight takes queen, king me, I guess. I take king, so I win.
The king isn't very strong in chess, so you just got to downgrade.
Exactly. So I mean, what's the rule? So I capture your.
You were given size 1 gimbaled weapons.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just a mess. They need to be consistent with it, and that includes proper pacing. Now, as far as dealing with the flying in the atmosphere, especially when it comes to the VTOL and things like that, one of my thoughts on this for a while has been if they wanted to design good atmospheric flight, including VTOL, and good space flight that meshes, basically what you do is you design all the ships to fly the way that you want in atmosphere. And as you ascend, as you move away from the planet, as you get away from drag, you get away from lift, you get away from gravity, those factors in a physics-based game are removed from the default operational parameters of your craft, and then your ship handles differently in space. And this would lead to ships having different functional envelopes in different environments. For example, ships with wings would perform at a higher envelope than, say, a freelancer in atmosphere. These differentiations in ships would go along with form-following function. And I feel that once you get flying centered the way you want it in atmosphere, and you got engines and equipment ships that can get to space, and you subtract those differences, I think a lot of the polite model could come out pretty interesting, and I think it could come out in a very good way. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, it'd be relatively easy because all you're doing is making one flight system, and then
exactly.
You're just removing the outside effects.
Right. It's like, a unified flight system.
Yeah, like drag would definitely be the largest factor. A very, very sleek ship would perform very similarly in atmosphere to space because it's got a lot less drag, but very large and bulky ships are going to be a whole lot slower in atmosphere because of all.
But once they get to space, that's a different animal.
Yeah. One other note before we move on to the next section is reverse thrusters, which we technically have currently, like 737s or 747s. I don't know which one which. There are certain, I believe, Russian jets that have like clamps that fold over behind the engines, so you get a thrust vectoring, and that's something we have now. Crude as it may be in some cases, there's no reason why you can't have some type of thrust vectoring. The most, I guess, best example I could use would be the Vanguard with its very, very large engines, and they've talked about how it has very large retros. And that could be because
it's got the retros along the side of the cockpit too.
That'd be a very good example of a ship that can stop on a dime, but you might be pulling 6, 7, 8 Gs.
Eyes out would be bad. Yeah. Anyway.
If you bring in
it would have more effective stopping potential than say something like the 350R, which doesn't actually have any engines pointed really in that direction. It may have little slats on the wings that may be able to be reversed, but for the most part it's nothing like the potential of being able to use your main engines in reverse, or like the Cutlass being able to spin its engines completely backwards,
right,
or forward.
Even the Cutlass, though, it's technically thrusting against itself, on some level, because that front wing, so instead of getting like 100% thrust backwards, maybe you're getting like 80% thrust, but still 80% of your mains in reverse is a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say that the Vanguard would have that. I'd say maybe it has between 50 and 60 on the upper end.
And once again, that's form following function. Ships have handling differently once they get into with the way that they're built, and I think that's awesome. Everyone gets a different experience, and every ship is a reason to own it. There's a reason to want to fly it, because the experience is different from one to the next. All right, so at 12 minutes and 31 seconds, they decided to talk a little bit about the 890 jump. They wanted to know if existing weapons and the 890 jump will be sized up to be on level with par with smaller ships. The short answer to that is no.
The longer answer on that would be probably not. Part of this, if you go and watch the show, is they talk about that the gun mounts won't support larger guns.
Right, because they retract into the ship.
Right, exactly. So they were saying, maybe we could quad mount them and stuff, and that's a whole nother can of worms we'll cover in a minute. But they also were talking about, hey, maybe we don't have to balance every single ship with themselves. That's not wrong, but I think it's part of the problem. It is more in like, hey, we made this really awesome ship. Oh crap, we made it too weak because we didn't factor in these other things, but now we can't fix it, and it'd be really weird to scale it up.
Yeah, and it's also part of the problem with the idea that a lot of these ships are talking about the weapon sizes. Like a ship that large running weapons that size, those guns should be able to fire forever. The problem is largely when it comes to defending these ships is the turrets. Turrets have a lot of trouble tracking right now. Vector changes. The faster ships can change vector, the harder it is for turrets to track. The faster ships fly, the harder it is for turrets to track. If their plan is to increase vector changes when it comes to flight again, then the turrets are only going to get worse. And 890 is a gigantic target. And thanks to ballistic penetration, it's one of those ships, a lot of these capital ships are basically getting attacked with ballistic weapons because they can bypass their very resilient defenses and just go straight for the hull. And armor's not online yet, so that's an issue as well. But I read an idea on the forums, and I can't remember who it was. Like, if you know who, if you watch this, then thank you for the idea. I think it's something it's interesting as a concept when it comes to ballistic penetration. Is that the less power a shield has, the more potential penetration that a shield has for ballistics as there are gaps forming in the shield. So, for example, at 100% shield, the physical weapons are pointless. As it drops down to, let's say, 80%, then maybe 5% of projectile ammo can get through little gaps. It goes down maybe 20%. Then you're looking at a lot more coming through. And those numbers would have to be balanced in flux. But I kind of like the idea that as shields get weaker, then their resistance to physical goes down. So you're pounding on them with energy. You start tearing down their shields, and now there's enough gap you feel it's worth to start firing with your physical weapons. I think that's cooler. Anyway, so
I really have no problem with that kind of system.
Yeah, because it works well on large ships because they have the strongest shield, so they're the most resilient, the longest. And fighters, their shields aren't as strong, so they go down quicker, which means that opens it up for the physical weapons quicker. So it kind of creates this dynamic where the fighters come in and their shields are down, and and that's when you take them out. And the large ships, it's kind of like Return of the Jedi. The shields are down, and the A-wing flies into the cockpit at that point in time because now it's got no physical protection whatsoever. But it's kind of one of those things that the large ships would be resilient to it, the smaller ships wouldn't be as much, and I think that's the interesting balance.
Yeah, because it goes in line with one of the things that we've said before, where shields should have the highest resistance to physical, and
that's what they're made for.
Armor should be the highest to energy, because it just makes sense logically. If you're building a spaceship, you need some type of shield to block physical objects from smashing into your ship.
Yeah, and that's why they made it to begin with.
Speeds. And then the armor is trying to block radiation and heat and stuff, because it's really hard to get rid of heat in space. I don't know if people realize this. Right.
And so, this gives them the penetration that they want, but in a way that has more meaning than just a flat, constant penetration for reasons.
And on this, because we love to cover our weapons. In fact, we've covered it so much that we don't like to cover it anymore. We have other videos that you can watch regarding this. The biggest problem, I think, is the damage spread, which I think we actually talk about later in this actual episode, because this is the second time, because the first part got destroyed. But yeah, there really should only be about a 10 to 20% gap between the different tiers of, like, a size 1 to a size 2. And there's other ways you can balance this, like maybe your size 2s actually have 20% more damage than a size 1, but they also build up heat like 20% faster. So you end up having a better burst, but you don't have as good a sustained. So you'll end up, either if you keep firing, you melt your weapons, and now you have 100% less damage because now your weapons are broken. So combat is something that needs to really be reined in before it gets too far gone.
Yeah, and it
has
also
to rebuild half the game.
It honestly starts at the core, though. We all need to be playing the same game with universal controls, because it's a mess.
Yeah, weapons don't matter until we have a decent control.
Yeah,
they matter a little bit, but
yeah, guns go on the ship.
controls
The ship doesn't go on the guns. So
Yeah.
Now, they did talk a bit at 1430 about interdictors versus interceptors, and this is when it came to the Buccaneer and the 325. They just kind of misnamed it. They're not interdictors, they're interceptors. They're basically they're just made to perform better at higher speeds.
And I like that idea. It's another thing we've talked about, actually, where certain ships are, I believe this was one of my ideas, they're geared for, I keep going to car references all the time here, but there's just the easiest thing for me, as someone who's played a lot of racing games. You have a transmission that's designed to run at incredibly high RPMs. It doesn't run as good at the low RPMs, but once you get it to those high RPMs, it becomes a whole other machine, and as long as you keep it there, it'll perform great. So in the case of a spaceship, you probably have a more powerful engine, but you're sacrificing something. Maybe you have less shields, or you have less armor because you need to be lighter. Maybe the engine uses a lot of fuel. There's a lot of ways you can balance this, but kind of the end goal is you have a very, very fast ship in a straight line, but it also can still keep up better maneuvers at high speeds. Actually, I think we forgot about this from the first time around, but I'm just going to ignore the fact that when you're at higher speeds, if you're constantly accelerating and then you start doing maneuvers, you have a lot higher G load on you. But if you're at a consistent speed and not accelerating, then it's you don't actually have any extra G's being applied.
All right, and at 19 minutes and 32 seconds, they got into a little bit of the Vanguard. They were talking about the fact that you'll be able to swap out the weapons in the nose, which is absolutely great. That's been a long-standing complaint from a lot of people. I think there was 3 or 4 different variants of the weapons right now in the front, a physical, energy, and a disruptor kind. There may be more coming in the future, and I'm excited to see that, because that was one of the major weak spots of the ship, was sometimes you couldn't get the weapon blend you wanted, and it hamstrung the ship a little bit.
They work on all variants.
It should, yeah.
And speaking of variants, one of those variants is EMP. And EMP is dumb, and I hate it.
EMP is a tricky thing in any game, because I agree. Like in Star Trek Online, there was a thing, like, there was those, the Tychon's Rift or whatever, or something like that science could do every now and then. It would literally just shut your ship down. You just sit there, shut off.
Oh yeah, the energy drain one.
Yeah, and you would just sit there. You were just fucked, and there was nothing. And then they could stack it with abilities and whatnot, and underpowered, and you just sat there in this vortex, and you just died because there was nothing you could do. And we hated it then too. It was like slapping the controller right out of our hands. You might as well just go get us. You just might wait for click the respawn button because you're done.
Yeah.
Now EMP
power levels got a bit more insane. There was ways out of it, or you'd hold on to your evasive maneuvers and pop that, and that give you a speed boost to get out of it. But I mean, it wasn't great, right? This is a 30-second cooldown versus a 2-minute cooldown power. Right?
And I agree that ships should have a certain amount of EMP resistance because they're built to deal with space radiation and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what I think is that, like, to make EMP better, it should be something that you would want to use as an opportunity. Now, what that opportunity is like, if the ship is taking damage, or the shields are reduced in strength or lowered, like if you get the ship into a more weakened state, then the EMP might be enough to push it over the edge. If you use it at full strength, you may reduce system effectiveness from them for a while until the systems can ramp back up. But it shouldn't shut someone down. It's too much of an I win button.
It really is.
And that's a very frustrating thing. So like example, if you use an EMP on a ship that's got all of its shields, it's not damaged, you may like
Basically
take
nothing's gonna happen.
well, yeah, you can take like 10% of its effectiveness off for 30 seconds or whatever, right? But if you take it like a ship is down to like 20% hull, and like this is where it gets to be perfect for a bounty hunter. It's 20% left, and the shields are all whacked. You hit it and you disable it for you could disable that thing for completely. And so, like, it depends on the state of the ship, and so there needs to be like these things, like kind of firing missiles at a ship with shields fully up is not going to be very effective. But you wait till the shields drop and fire that missile, it's party time. So, I mean, by creating dynamics where it's not just you want to use the at the right opportunity, the right moment, it creates a better sense of gameplay than I'm going to run up to that Connie with my EMP, boom, disable, kill him, and that's gonna become the go-to.
I actually reworded this because I had the that's like going into someone's house and slapping the keyboard out of their hands.
That's the statement you made Star Trek Online too, basically.
Yeah.
Correct that too.
It's just like, well, I can't do anything.
Yeah, it's like I was walking the control.
I reworded it to be a little bit more elegant.
Yeah, but your statement is brutal but fucking honest. So
yeah.
All right, now we jump into my personal favorite at 32 minutes and 30 seconds. They get into the auto-gimbals issue, where they have, quote-unquote, fixed the size 1 issue by breaking their own rules. Quote-unquote, we've broken our own rules.
You actually called me up and were like, oh, you got to watch this and blah, blah, blah. And we talked a little bit about this on the phone before I watched it. And when I went and watched it, they clarified that it's only for size 1, so it's not as bad as I thought. And I can see where they're going with this, but again, we come back to the damage disparity, and to be honest, if you're gonna allow a size 1 weapon to be gimbaled, and it's like a special size 1 gimbal mounting, it has to have a downside. Maybe it's not as accurate. Maybe it overheats quicker. I don't care if the damage is the same as a fixed size 1, but it needs to have some kind of downside to it.
And this is problem starts to come in. You see, when you create rules for a game that you have to break in order to make something work, your rules suck. And I'm just gonna be frank about that. The whole -1 size on gimbals was a very lowbrow fix to their balancing first and zero order control issues, which is impossible. I mean, I've yet to see a game that's done it. The damage spread between these tiers is too great, and because of this balance issue, the size 1 guns are useless. You get a starter ship out there, who can't kill anything. It can be killed by everything. That's not going to make a player come in. Now, their gimbals were made to, quote-unquote, be an assist, something that for new players to come in and use. Gimbals should not be an assist to anybody. They should be a tool like anything else. And new players should be able to come in and use fixed weapons if that's their preference, or they should be able to come in and use gimbal weapons if that's their preference. Neither one of them should be crutches. The game shouldn't need a crutch. It should just be playable, and as you get better ships or more advanced ships, they're a little bit more high end. Like I get into, here's my Ford Tempo, and then I'm going to go ahead and eventually get into a Ferrari, right? So like everyone can drive the Ford Tempo, and then you have to work your way up to be able to handle the racing with the Ferrari. It's going to take skill, practice, and time to get up there. The weapons shouldn't be
lots of money.
Yeah, or money. The weapons shouldn't be the crutch part. You're classing up your ship. The weapons aren't the defining feature of the game. This goes to the whole idea of these core issues of control that have been ignored pretty much since they changed it. When the game first came out, 0.8, everyone had controls the same way. All weapons were gimbaled, all auto-tracked. Everyone was playing on the same field. You had everyone from all control types basically playing the game the same way, and there was people doing well with all control types. When they changed it over to create a special control type for one method on one controller that can't even be used by the other control methods on the same controller, and then started trying to split and balance everything out, suddenly we've got different game experiences depending upon what you're using. And you can't balance that. You can't balance what's in the game and what's on your desk, depending upon, not only the quality of what's on his desk, but the mode that he's using of that device on that desk. It's too much. It's too much for any human being to consider. It's basically become a gigantic wound, and they keep slapping more band-aids on it. And the wound underneath is festering, and it's becoming gangrenous. And, the thing is that here's the thing about the secret about designing a good flight game, as far as this is concerned. You equip guns on a ship. You don't equip ships on guns. And it seems to me that a lot of their methodologies is about the guns need to be delivered there by this ship you attach to it. They need to change that thought process. And I really feel that they're more interested in shooting than flying, and it's caused a lot of problems.
So one last thing before we move on is we've touched on it a little bit with the different topics in here, and the damage scaling is one of the biggest problems with the guns. But if they brought it down a little bit, this is something that I personally have talked about, and I'm sure we have a video of it somewhere. It'll probably be linked. If you classify weapons to certain types, right? So let's say you have size 1 to 3. Those are light weapon or fighter level weaponry, right? And then you have 4 and 5 and maybe 6, and these are like the medium sized things. It's okay to have a gap between those. Because, if there's a 10% difference between a size 1 and a size 2 and a size 3, well, you got like a 20 or 30% difference between a size 1 and a size 3, and that can be a lot. And depending on how you modify or what type of weapon you have, like the brand or something, you can end up with a pretty different gameplay between the different weapons. But when you go up to like size 4 and size 5 and things, these to me really should be on larger weapons only. And this is like the only example I would say is fine to have more than like a 10 or 20% gap between them, because it's emphasizing that, hey, you're in like medium size, like ships right now. You're in the heavy fighters and the bombers, the things that are designed to be large.
The ships that have the power plants to sustain weapons like that.
Exactly, right. So it's kind of like, hey, don't take this the wrong way, but it's like, you've gone from the kiddie pool to the teenager pool. I don't know a better way to describe it.
No, and what you're saying makes perfect sense. There's a lot of games out there that have that kind of a split between light, medium, and heavy, and it comes down to what the ships can sustain, and that's another great way. I mean, I talked about horizontal progression, where if you have 6 guns on a ship, maybe you have 3 sets of 2s with different weapons that do different things, as opposed to just all guns firing all the time. And so like when you're here talking about that and you split that up with small, medium, and large classifications, I mean, that's a cool concept. And what you're also doing is you're creating a boundary. You're creating a boundary for design, and you're saying, here's an area that you can work within, and here's another area you can work within, and then you're breaking it up into smaller, more balanceable chunks, as opposed to like these gigantic. Here's everything. Like you grab a bunch of guns, you throw them all on the ground, and go balance that. Yeah, I like that concept. I like the concept of splitting it up. And obviously there's a size 10 weapons. The last one would be like 7 through 10, which is going to be 4 weapons. But let's face it, that size 10 is that rail gun, so that's kind of its own thing. Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it too. I mean, you split it up in classifications and there'll be some ships that can like use the medium. Like the Vanguard has that size 5 on its chin, but the Vanguard's kind of a medium ship anyway. So
yeah, it's way above like a heavy fighter classification. Yeah, and realistically, it's almost more of a light bomber if you look at the World War II classification.
Yeah, well, there is a bomber variant. I mean, it's got torpedoes.
Right, exactly. So I really wouldn't classify that as a heavy fighter.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Oh, good thoughts.
There's another interesting thing in like sci-fi. If you want to look at anime, the example would be Space Battleship Yamato. And if you want to go to sci-fi, you have in the Star Wars games, books, lore, movies, you have like Death Star and the Super Star Destroyer and those big monster, hyper lasers or whatever they are.
Axial
and
super
those
laser.
would be, yeah, there you go. I mean, you knew what it is. But like something like that on one of the mega capital ships. I mean, that's like this is the flagship fleet, and you don't want to mess with it because it'll just obliterate you. However, maybe that main weapon basically shuts everything off after they fire it. I know that's kind of true with the original Death Star. Anyway,
but I'm gonna have some. I'm gonna have some links down below to some other videos we've done. They're longer form ones of discussion. We talk about rotation. We talk about gunnery. We talk a bit about the flight model. I think there's 3 main ones. I'm going to try to link down there. And if you haven't seen them, feel free to give them a watch. They are longer form discussions, and they have math, they have charts, they have breakdowns, and they link to forum posts that were put there. They have guest hosts on there that are special, that their career, MHE mostly, that his job is flying, and he did a really great breakdown of the math involved in these topics and why these things need to be looked at. It's a very complicated subject. We've been into it for years now. We're easily into the 4th year on this channel, and I've been debating this in the forums for 2-3 years before that. So if you're catching the middle of the end of this, and you're here this long, thank you. We love you, and good luck.
Why take one ship with 2 people when you can take 2 ships?
At 34 minutes and 30 seconds.
So this has been a debate for a long time. In the show, the comment, if one person has a pretty basic starting ship, it might not be much help. But they're exclusively talking about combat here. Maybe you have an Aurora, and yeah, the Aurora is not very good in combat, but maybe you have the cargo version, right? There's really, especially if you have the money to fill up the cargo hold, there is no downside to bringing an extra ship with extra cargo, unless you really, really need like an extra gunner or something on the Connie, and he's willing to split the profit from the cargo. The turret argument comes up here because turrets are they're not in a good spot. One turret does not equal one escorting ship. We can use the Connie for another example here. I believe the Connie has got size 3 guns on its turrets. But even then, even if it had 2 size 3s, that's not equivalent to any higher tier fighter out there. It'll way out damage you. It'll outmaneuver you.
Yep. And
just a sitting duck for those things.
And that's why I keep going back to horizontal progression, because if ships are only firing groups of 2, that 2 guns in that turret matches what the ship's doing. You see, the ship's just carrying more weapon types. It's firing 2 weapons. The turret's firing 2 weapons. Guess what? We got a balance, right? So yeah, that's
the turrets. The turrets, I think, are really only going to self-balance themselves up at the really, really high end. And by the high end, I mean actual capital ships, destroyers, cruisers, battleships.
Well,
these things that have monstrous weaponry that are designed as the main armament. You don't really have,
and those
weapons.
And those big turrets won't be good at tracking fighters. They'll be good for taking out other larger ships.
They're purely to go against other large ships, so they basically self-balance with themselves.
Well, and the thing is that they talked about how having a second person reduce costs and stuff like that. I get that, but that's also really that's not a good end all be all. Let me give you an example, because we're gonna.
Your ship should not cost that much to run, so that right there is like, oh hey, why take this SUV that gets 25 miles to the gallon when we can take 2 cars that get 32 miles to the gallon? But now you have double the fuel cost.
Well, but here's the thing. As long as the turret, people running turrets can do more than just run the turrets. If they can fully manage the systems, balance shields. Obviously, if they're on voice view, they're going to be able to call out things. That's going to be a help too. While the pilot's fixated front, the guy in the turret can spin his view and give the pilot more information. But that would require that the game doesn't always provide that information to you. Like the radar isn't a constant 360 unless you have specifically have a sensor ship like the Hornet Tracker that has a sensor dish on it. If you don't, then you have radar directions, maybe forward, maybe back, and some blind, maybe nothing on the sides. So like you have these areas where situational awareness is weaker, but now a guy in a turret can spin the turret and tell him what's going on in a direction. So it's not just about DACA. It's about working together with systems and spotting and everything like that that helps the pilot make informed decisions. It's a matter of once again, if you restrict some things in some area and you can add depth in others. When you have no restrictions, you have no gameplay for anyone else. If the pilot can do it all, then there's nothing left for anyone else. And so they need to kind of rein in some of this desire to be a one-man army to make multi-crew work effectively, in my opinion.
Just adding the ability to control subsystems goes a long way to multi-crew, because like right now you can, but it doesn't affect the ship at all. Like I can jump into Jarrus's ship, right? I jump in the co-pilot seat, right? And I can take power away from every single device, but it doesn't change anything because it's not
it's not online yet.
Now.
Yeah, and that's why I keep saying, like, the more of these systems that keep coming online for multi-crew, and they're only there cosmetically right now for the most part when it comes to the actual systems and turrets or whatnot. They function, but once again, not entirely in the way they should or could. As these systems come online, I keep stressing that I think you're going to see that the pacing of the flight is going to come down organically because it's going to be too fast. It's going to be too fast. And now some people might complain about that, but you're not, realize that as the systems come online, you'll be busy doing other things, not just like when I'm playing DCS, I'm in the F-14 or whatever. There's other things I'm doing in that cockpit. There are systems I have to run. There are things going on. It's not just like, waiting to pull the trigger next. There's a whole balance in there of doing things, and that involves having fully functional systems, which we kind of don't right now, and that will change. Okay, so about 38 minutes and 20 seconds in, there was a question about why we're now quantum jumping into atmosphere, and they kind of missed the atmospheric effects of burning up an atmosphere, what are the reentry effects, and they kind of wanted to know why that was.
I actually didn't even know it was a thing because I haven't played in so long.
Well, I do most of the flying anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's true too. And me personally, here's a shocker. Jarvis and I don't agree all the time on this. I agree to a certain extent.
Lightning Dragon has been kicked from the channel.
But like, you're skipping the reentry effects, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of weird. Because my brain goes, hey, unless you got some space magic going on here, your ship is going to be superheated and you're going to be cooked alive inside of it. You just die. I mean, that's just how freaking, math and physics and heat and all that stuff works. I don't mind that the quantum is faster. Again, it's really going to take a long time to balance that. I feel it's going to get better as the systems get larger. We have jump drives or whatever to go between two different systems. I forget what it's called, even though we just talked about it. So the travel speed, it's always going to be in flux. I would prefer it be a little bit faster because I don't want to waste 30 minutes traveling to go and find Jarvis because, oh, hey, I'm at this one asteroid field. It's over here. There's all this great, ore and stuff. I don't want to waste 30 minutes to an hour to travel to this place and get some rocks because I'm going to just pull up a different game at random. In Monster Hunter, I can do like 4 or 5 hunts in Monster Hunter, depending on how fast I am, in that space of an hour and have a whole lot more fun than staring at a computer screen. That is where my argument comes for the faster travel. But as far as warping through the atmosphere, that's where I would cross the line of realism. I don't care how much space magic you have. I don't like that.
Well, they said what it was that you're traveling through the atmosphere so quickly with the spline jumping that the effects like activate and deactivate before you even notice it. It's like you've rammed through so fast.
Just not how physics work, though.
But see, in my opinion, I think this getting onto a planet is a part of the experience, and I think this goes along the lines of perfect example of listening to groups of people who need to have everything instantly. So my thoughts are, why even bother having atmosphere effects at all if you can just spline jump to your location? I mean, the next best step is just to pay credits and instantly travel to your destination. I mean, how many cool things have been pushed aside because somebody's not happy that in a universe sandbox, you have to fly from space to ground, and often it feels like that there's a lack of cohesive vision, a lack of focus that. Basically, they change it to whatever is perceived as popular. And we're going to get back into that in a little bit. But, I mean, in a game that has survival mechanics, underground cave exploration, mining, salvaging, deep space research, deep space repairs, multi-crew, that we shouldn't be bothered with being responsible to travel to our locations because it takes too long? I mean, to me, that is, you have to wrap your head around that dichotomy. We have all this really deep stuff, and and then it's going to take time to do. But this part of it is so insignificant. The flying part of it is so insignificant that we're just going to fast food it. What part of Star Citizen is supposed to be a quick in and out game? I mean, there's Arena Commander, right? I mean, you've got that for that. If you want like a 5-minute battle, go play Arena Commander. But if you don't want to put any time into the game, in a living, breathing universe, then why play it? What's the point? It's I don't want to see the whole persistent universe stripped down so that people can just get their next kill in. And it really feels like this whole idea of just faster, and it feels like a lack of vision and focus. And I said we'll get back into that in just a few minutes as a final thought.
Interstellar Rift, we've played on the channel, I feel is in a pretty good place for its travel. In that game, you basically have gears you shift into,
Yeah.
and the higher the gear you shift into, the faster your ship goes, but also the more energy that your ship uses.
Mhm,
So if
mhm.
you want to get to someplace really, really fast, well, that's fine, but you have to have a ship that can run at those ridiculously high speeds. I mean, you get to the point in that game where you're actually going, it's like 3 AU a second or something. So that means you're traveling back and forth between the Earth and the Sun 1.5 times. Yeah, in like a second or something. That game, I think, does a good job. I don't think that kind of system would really work as much in Star Citizen. I believe we talked about this in another quantum travel episode thing.
This is why I thought like they should allow you to go ahead and hire a charter. And just like I like next time I log in, I want to be on this planet, and you can just pay like a charter, and then you log out, and then your character through the means of game magic
and or ship, depending on how big the ship is.
Right. Well, I mean, like you just like I'm gonna, you can hire someone to transport your ship to, I guess. But I'm thinking more along the lines like I want to go over here, but I just as a person, so I'm gonna pay this charter to ticket. I'm gonna sit, get on the flight and then log out.
Transport ships exist,
right?
I mean, you have the actual space liner, which is just a passenger ship. You have the Constellation Phoenix, which is a VIP transport. I believe the 890 Jumper or the 600i or something is another one that transfers things. I'd rather see it where you have like a ramp up to a certain speed and then a slowdown. So realistically,
well, like Elite Dangerous does to some degree, they do a pretty good job on it.
Yeah, I'm basically just saying Elite Dangerous travel because you build up to a certain speed. And your top speed is your halfway distance, right? Because you're building up as it's safer to get to those high speeds. And you start slowing down because you don't want to slam into a planet at the speed of light because that would obliterate everything.
Yeah, but you'll be dead, so you won't care.
Well, yeah, but the people living on the planet probably won't be very happy about it.
At 40 minutes and 40 seconds, there was a general question about the flight model. Are you happy with it?
I sure hope not. It does sound like they want to slow it down again. But, we'll see how long that lasts.
It sounds like what they want to do is slow it down and then increase vector changes. If I got that right. If I'm wrong, just go to 40 minutes, 40 seconds mark on that. So it's just a lot of stuff to take notes on and cover. So, maybe not 100% accurate on that, but that's what I remember. Don't crucify me. So anyway, the point is that like when we get into discussions about the flight model, one of the things that they never talk about is controls, gunnery, rotation rates. I keep watching these videos where they talk about flight, and they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. They end up changing the factors that, imagine if you will, you've got like a road, and along this road is comprised of the factors that make our flight. Now there are other roads that can travel on. Okay, but they ignore them. They just have this one road, and they keep driving up and down this road, and at both ends is one group is completely unhappy, one group loves it. On the other side, one group loves it, and the other side hates it. And in between, nobody's happy. And because it doesn't matter, that everything is kind of just meh. So instead of like going on a different road and trying something different, they just keep going up and down this road with variants of the same of the factors within that, and they never find a sweet spot. They never get where they're trying to go because they're not driving on other roads. And this is really the problem. They slightly reduced projectile speeds, which was good. That was one of the things we talked about. But they're still not within the ranges that they need for, and that would be the projectile problem video. I'll probably have linked down below to get the distances they want for engagement. And the odd thing is, as far as gunnery and the rotations and the controls, the weird thing about Star Citizen is that it seems like of all the things they keep changing, these are the sacred cows for the most part. They barely, if ever, touch. It's like they figured day one they got it right, like done, print it, and then they zipped that file up and they started printing it on a disk and they were done with it, or whatever. It shows my age. I'm actually talking about a disk, not downloading. At least I didn't say floppy. I mean, I could have said floppy.
I grew up with floppy drives.
So anyway, so the thing is that it's like they took that particular section of the gameplay and they just hardened it in steel and said this can't be touched. This is amazing, and we got it right first time. And they didn't. That's the core, and that's the part that they got the most wrong. And they've solidified this, and they refuse to touch it. As they said, they're not comfortable reducing rotation rates. Well, okay, but then they say we want positional combat. I'm like, huh? And how you do that without reducing rotation rates? There is no answer for that because you have to reduce rotation rate, skip positional combat. It just goes on and on. So we've broken it all down ad nauseum over the years, and every suggestion that we have made that would help flight, I don't think they've done, other than slightly reducing the projectile rates. I don't think they've done nearly any of them. And I think it's funny that sometimes we get criticized, like, oh, it's the flight first community that's ruining flights. Like, really, have they implemented anything that we've said? Because I'm not seeing any of it. So yeah, you just go on with your bad self. I don't know how you're connecting that. It's like the level of disconnect there is huge. But anyway, so I mean, we're gonna keep yo-yoing or driving back and forth down this road continuously until they decide to try a different road. And that's all we can do is watch this and hope that at some point in time the penny drops. And now it's time for a personal love letter to Lightning Dragon.
Oh, jeez.
At 49 minutes and 10 seconds, they talked about the Retaliator.
Yeah, and I don't have it in our notes, but John Crew said, "Oh, it's a great ship. Nothing wrong with the ship." And it's like, really? Do you think it's fine? Because I don't think anyone in the community thinks it's fine. And another thing, and I'm not like the personal attack kind of person, and please, God, don't personally attack any of these developer people. A lot of them are crazy hard workers. They're amazing at what they do.
Yeah, they're smart guys. I just think we all have our own personal biases and things, and we have our own blocks. I'm not besmirching, their perspectives, just saying that they just won't work.
And also context, right? Context is something that you really can't place, especially if it's someone you don't know personally, or if it's text. Text is the biggest
text
example
is the worst. Yeah.
Of taking things out of context. But Lando holds up this piece of paper, and he goes, "There's a long list here with suggestions on it, but this isn't how this works." And I sure hope he means the show, because if they just take all the fan suggestions and say, "Hey, a lot of these are really good ideas," and they throw that list in the big incinerator they have in the middle of the office that powers the place and says, "Hey, let's make our own ideas," that's really, really ignorant. So, I mean, it's like, I'm not taking a personal shot at Lando. I just, the phrasing is really weird here.
Yeah, it's like, it's open development. We want your feedback. Oh, thanks for the feedback. Light it on fire, throw it in the garbage.
Yeah, and we don't care. So I really hope he just means the show, because I don't know. The way people word things sometimes, it's like, really? I mean, I sure hope you mean something else.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that he just
probably he may have had a moment of foot and mouth disease. So.
But yeah, I mean, he could very well just mean that, hey, this isn't how the show works. We're not going to read off a list of suggestions. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, if that's not the show, that's not the show, right? And it's just something that I took note of, and I thought was kind of strange. But the biggest problem the Retaliator has, first of all, it's one of the early ships. So it suffered from feature creep, where newer ships have been introduced that are more powerful, which changes the meta. So every other ship that comes after has to follow the new meta. And they haven't gone back and updated the Retaliator.
Yeah, it was literally the first ship with internals that we even saw. They were showing the persistent universe, and this thing is OG, pretty much for as far as usable multi-crew ships.
Part of the big problem with the Retaliator is the fact that its arsenal is mostly made up of turrets, and they're size 1 turrets.
No, they're size 2.
But they were size 1 for a long.
Yeah, and then they upped them to size 2,
time.
but they still need to be size 3 because it's
the problem is, it goes back to my statement I had before, where you really should have these in classes.
Right.
And the Retaliator is not a fighter. It should not have fighter grade weaponry. It should, at the least, have size 3 guns on there. Now, maybe they're low tier size 3, or maybe they're high tier size 3, or low tier size 4. Because you don't have to, I mean, like, literally, just because the weapon is classed as a size 4, it doesn't mean it has to be a size 4 in, like, its volume, because that's dumb. But what you could have is a low efficiency or something size 4 weaponry that's designed to shoot a lot, but maybe it doesn't do as much damage. It'll do more or as much. You mean
like a high efficiency that shoot?
Right, high efficiency. I get that confused all the time. But imagine the Retaliator with size 4 guns that were effectively, they worked as size 3s, right? And you get 2 of them per turret, and you got 5 turrets. That's a lot of firepower,
Right.
because it has to be, because that's its
Well-
main defensive armament.
And this goes back to when I look at this. Okay, basically, if I remember this right, 2 Eclipses carry the same amount of torpedo firepower. So why would you put 6 people in a ship that you can do the same job with 2 smaller ships? And this goes
Right.
back to, like, they were talking about the amount of weaponry, the amount of torpedoes a ship carries, and that they might need to revisit that, or they could be considering it anyway. And they talked about their rotating drum version and like a clip stacking one. And the clip stacking one to me makes the most sense, because it first of all, it's technically the simplest one to make, and second one is with the staggered kind of like bullets in a clip, you can probably get even more in there, and they just drop out the bottom. But the thing is that if there's 6 people in a Retaliator, it needs to be worth 6 people in an Eclipse, 6 Eclipses. You know what I'm saying? There needs to be an equal value for those 6 people. Otherwise, there's no point to it. Why would I put 6 people in a ship where I could just fly 2 Eclipses for 2, or actually I could fly 6 Eclipses that are going to deliver 3 times the payload.
And you have like super stealth mode.
Right, and you have you're stealthy and you can get
faster.
away quick. Yeah, exactly. So why, so the Retaliator
Doesn't the
needs.
Eclipse also have pilot guns on it?
It does.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean,
Ever
it's
since
just they don't.
Yeah, never says the
just
word.
don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, so the Retaliator should have at least the same amount of torpedoes that the 6 of those would have, and which it could fit if they did it right. And then it should also have higher defense. Obviously, it's less stealthy, so it needs to be greater shields, greater armor. Okay,
Right.
and there needs to be a reason for that. That's the ship you take in to a capital ship or through a barrage of heavier fire, because it can take it where the Eclipses are not gonna, in an open engagement. Stealth isn't, if they know you're coming, your odds of your stealth
You've already
working.
screwed up.
Yeah, you've already screwed up.
I think the biggest thing they could do to make the Retaliator better is just make it so they're all remote guns. Make every single
they
gun
said that,
on there
actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Make every single gun on there a remote gun, and you have 2 gunner's turrets. You have a top gunner position and a bottom gunner position, and basically you just have a little camera. So you have one guy on top who controls 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a guy on the bottom who controls 2. And now you've reduced that 7-man crew, like a max crew or a skeleton
Right,
crew, I guess,
to 4.
to 3.
Well, yeah, 4 if you have an engineer, but yeah, like a guy working the system.
Well, the engineer thing, you could technically also give it to one of the gunners.
Yeah,
but,
that's
but
true.
I would definitely agree that the ship should have some type of Rio position. I don't know if I'd redesign the cockpit. I mean, that'd be the easiest way to do it.
But yeah, but I definitely agree. I mean, they talked about how you're going to be able to automate those turrets, and I think that's I think honestly the way they
But they shouldn't be like the Blade style where it's like, oh, you can make it so they're.
I think
they're
that's what they're going to do.
But like, okay, so to clarify, so that I'm not misspeaking or explaining. By default, I think they should be remote guns. Top and bottom, you just have 2 gunners.
Linked to a gun.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm okay with them where it's like, okay, you put in the blade and now they're automated guns. I'm
Mhm.
okay with that, but I don't think that they should have to have a blade to be automated. I think we're
You're
kind of
saying
in this...
automation. You're saying automation versus slaving it.
Right.
Yeah, I completely, I understand the difference, and I agree either one will be viable. I think slaving guns to a particular station versus then automation. Those are 2 viable solutions.
Yeah, because automated guns are already becoming very, very popular in the larger ships.
Right,
So
right.
why wouldn't this ship, which is...
Well, the Super Hornet has it. The Super Hornet has
Yeah.
a slave turret.
Yeah, but like in the lore, if you want to just keep on talking about the Retaliator, because we can, in the lore, the Retaliator is actually a very, very
Because you
old
asked
ship.
for it.
Yeah, here it is. So the Retaliator in lore is a very old ship. It's been around for a long time. It's been overhauled. It's been refit. It's one of those like it's the B-52, right? The B-52s are being modernized now. This is a plane from like the 60s or the 50s or something, and we're still using it today, 60 some odd years later, right? So this ship has got a lot of staying power. There is no reason why this ship wouldn't have not had avionics upgrades, armor upgrade, engine upgrades, a slight internal design change. So maybe they move some internal components around, and now they have 2 remote turrets. So, now you're not risking as many lives, because that is a huge deal for the military. It's why a lot of planes don't have that Rio seat anymore, is because you're putting 2 people's lives at risk instead of just 1. Granted, there are certain reasons why besides that, but that's basically the point I'm trying to come across here.
All right, so in about 52 minutes and 40 seconds, yes, we're almost at the end. They were asked if they were happy with ESP, enhanced stick precision, not the ability to read people's minds. For those of you who don't know.
I mean, when they said this, I'm like, I don't even remember what this does. I know it's a thing that we've talked about, which is
it's an
dumb.
aimbot. Even John Pritchett called it a low-level aimbot. It's basically it's a way to because the game is so twitchy and so geared towards zero order that they had to create an auto aim system basically that tries to get your stick on target to shoot, because shooting is the most important thing in flying.
Yes, indeed. There's nothing about flying. It's all about shooting. As they explain this more, I saw like talking about pips. Okay, well here's a good, easy way to fix a lot of the triple, double pips or whatever. Is if it's an energy weapon, it has blank meters per second travel time. If it's a physical weapon, it has blank travel time. So the only time you'd ever have different types of pips is if you're using energy and physical. And if you go back to something we said earlier, if you're using the Jarrus kind of idea where you're only using like a group of 2 or 3 guns at a time, if you're swapping between physical and energy, your pips are always the same because they're all the same projectile speed. So you don't have to have 60 different pips because you have 60 different guns on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some things I don't agree with. I talk about when you listen to your all energy moving the same, like no matter what kind of energy weapon it is. But at the same time, I also understand it because for netcode purposes, it's easier on the netcode for it not to have to figure out what kind of gun and what kind of speed that should be applied.
Because it's a video game.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's a video game.
And that's why I'm neutral on that idea. Not pro, not against, because I can see the pros and the cons. And I look at that and I'm like, it does have merit from a netcode standpoint. It has a lot of merit because you're simplifying, data that has to be sent. And right now, particularly in Star Citizen, that sounds like a damn good thing.
Yeah, it's got some problems with netcode and packet sharing and stuff.
So yeah, the ESP was added to kind of counteract the twitchy stuff that was put into the game. It's not really needed. You don't really see it in other games. It's just if they get the pacing and rotation, and acceleration, everything down to a reasonable level, they can just strip the whole stupid thing out.
And we'll all be better for it.
Oh yeah, big time. One Band-Aid gone. Now at 57 minutes and 10 seconds, and yes, this was a long show. Both this one and that one. They got into the 600i. They wanted to know if they were going to go back and revisit and revamp it maybe because it was kind of the prototype for the new Origin aesthetic on ships, and they probably will go back and revisit it later sometime. I really do hope so. There are some bad interior layout choices in there. It's one of my ships. But then again, it is a Tier 0 first implementation of the new aesthetic ship, so seeing these reworked is actually pretty common. Do I expect that to be reworked before Squadron 42 comes out? Absolutely not, because they got bigger fish to fry. That's a ship that I think they're going to rework post-launch of Squadron 42. I think I doubt that ship's in Squadron 42. If it is, then they may revamp it for the actual use in the game. But that's I highly doubt it. That's going to be a ship that flies by in the background at most. So you may see a revamp on the way they did it, but it'll be a while. It's not a bad ship. It says I have little things in there that bother me. It's like the bar. Like, why is the bartender looking at the stars and the guest looking at the back wall? There's little things like that. It's just like aesthetically, it's just bugged the crap out of me.
The bartender is more important.
The bartender gets the view. The guests get to look at the wall.
When they were testing it and walking around the inside, they walked over to the bar, pretended to be the bartender, because hey, I'm the bartender and I want a good view. Yeah. And they never played.
And that's all. He wouldn't accept the job unless they gave him a good view. So I'm just saying, like, it's little things like that. There's nothing physically wrong with the ship, except maybe the turrets are held on by rebar. I don't know why the turret arms are so ridiculously thin, but it's a functional ship in every sense of the word. It's got issues. So as we wrap up this show, it's got some final thoughts. Lightning, do you have any final thoughts? And then I'll get into my last thought about everything.
Well, because we've talked about combat so much, I just want to touch on it one final time before the end of this show that we're doing, in that combat really isn't that hard. I know it's a lot of work, but for example, if you just take 2 ships and you have them fight each other, maybe it's a Connie versus a Hornet, I don't care what, it's an example, and they go after each other and they go pew 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 pew, and then you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, this isn't really fun, or why aren't you dead yet? Then you go and look at the shield and armor values, and then you just change them, right? I know weapons need to be changed. We've already talked about that. So this is if and when they change weapons to be more consistent. So, for example, if the Hornet blows up too easy, or it is tougher than the Cutlass, which is like super ridiculously hard to kill right now, then maybe it has too much shields, or it has too much armor, or something, and they need to be less afraid to, I guess, nerf ships, because the game isn't even out yet. I mean, this is a really, really good example of real world stuff that's going on. Like the World of Tanks and Wargaming and stuff. When they sell a premium ship or a premium tank or something that you paid real money for, which you normally just play the game and you unlock them, they're really hesitant on changing these tanks or ships or something, because they don't want people that spent real money to get upset. But those games are already released and they work. Star Citizen isn't even there yet. I mean, this is still like alpha or pre-alpha or whatever. So they need to be okay with changing things if they feel it doesn't work. Is the Cutlass too strong? Maybe. So adjust the stats. Do some internal testing, realistic testing. Not just I'm going to point my ship at it and shoot it until it blows up. Oh, it blew up in 2 minutes. That's too slow, or that's too fast. I mean, a dogfight isn't just staring at someone and shooting your guns until they die.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of that's going to be balancing towards the end, and it's all part of pacing too, and time to disable before time to destroy. It is such a complicated balance, so they need to get that core fixed so we can get there. But the final point I want to bring up is kind of touched on a little bit earlier. It's about vision. Having a clear vision. Nothing great in this world can be made without having a clear vision, and the dedication to get that vision to fruition. If you let people assuage you because they're popular, or they're really loud, or they score really high on a broken game mode, and so they're now somehow the experts of what the game should be. If you push this vision aside to appease the popular, to appease the masses, your game will never, or whatever it is in life, if you just you give up on your goal, you give up on what you're trying to do, then it all falls apart. It's never great. It's never as great as it could be. How many people critique games like Dark Souls because they're too hard? But that's what makes Dark Souls Dark Souls. Whatever, like there was that that Dark Soul like ninja game that came out that just recently, I forget the name of it.
Sekiro or whatever.
Yeah, well, whatever it is. But the thing is that the game reviewers were like, oh, it needs to have an easy mode on it so we can play. It's like, and the game developers like, no. So that's the thing, is they have a vision of a game, difficulty or otherwise, and you pursue it. And it's okay to take feedback if you're achieving that goal. But don't throw your goal away. And in a lot of respects, I think we've seen a lot of this where you can go back to the original pitch trailer, you can go back to a lot of the early statements, and you can even go back to the point there where people are pointing out the problems and showing them the problems with math, logic, charts, evidence, links to other articles of games that have fallen down the same path, same route, and they still go down them because people who like or think that that's what they want. And even though it's going to destroy the vision, it's going to destroy the goal. So all I have to say is that, I don't know if any devs are listening to this, but you've got to stick to your goal, and you've got to stop trying to appease. Don't even try to appease me. I don't care if you like me or not. That's not why I'm doing this channel. I'm doing this to make sure the game is as good as possible. Look at the facts and stuff we presented. There's other people have presented. Look at the math. Programming is math at the end of the day. And if it helps you achieve your goal, then you should embrace it. But you shouldn't embrace Reddit. And you shouldn't embrace forum boards just for every complaint out there. Yeah, some systems aren't done yet. I totally get it. Like as Chris Roberts said, yeah, what was the quote? It's like, yeah, no shit, we know it's not finished. I get that. But don't throw your whole design away. Don't throw your goal away to be popular. Your game will never amount to anything special. You can make it special. That just depends on you. Alright everyone, well, I guess that's about it for this week's show. Don't know when the next one's coming out. When it does, you'll know about it.
Yeah, it'll be uploaded on the channel. So,
Yeah.
you know,
As long as you,
if you're subscribed and you've hit that bell button.
Oh gosh,
and you've liked this video.
Do I need to flash a shield alert right there? Ding ding ding.
No. It's just like if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll see the video come up.
Yeah, and I don't know what
YouTube will push it out.
I've actually heard from subscribers. I've been getting messages that they've been subscribed, but they're not actually seeing my videos, even with the bell click.
Did they click that bell button?
They did, but they're not getting my videos. I've had several now. I've had several now say that.
Then click the bell button.
So yeah. Anyway, you can join my Discord too. So if you want to go ahead and at least link the videos in there, you don't have to talk. You can just there's a video.
There are so many links down at this point. You just look in the video description. There's everything you need.
Yeah, everything you ever want to know. Meaning of life somewhere down below as well. So
42.
All right, everyone. Well, that's about everything. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.
42.
And just to touch on one last thing before we move on. Hopefully you didn't hear that.
I actually did.
I don't know what that was.
I put that in the outtakes. No, just kidding. No.
I'm going to start over because I don't know what that was.